Good evening, everyone. It's the Activated One, New Bright 10, the Futuritarian, breaking down why it's so important to have your father touch your child's head when it comes out the womb. The reason why it's so important is because when your child is in that womb, it's dealing with the mother, the mother's energy, the mother's electricity in her mind through her spinal cord and everything else that has to deal with mind activation, because it's always going to be about mind activation. It's always going to be that. Now, you also have to watch, talking to the women out here, you have to watch who you conceive with, who you let into your house. What's your house? Your house is your womb. That's your home. I'm going to give you an example. Now, when you go to somebody's house, you know your intentions. So when you go into somebody's house, you know your intentions. They don't know your intentions, so they're going to be on the defense. If they don't know you, they're going to be on the defense because that's their home. The woman's temple is her home. So when you let a man ejaculate inside you, then you're letting somebody into your home, your temple. See, it's a little bit different than when a man goes and ejaculates into a woman than a woman letting somebody into her. Why do I say that? The reason why I say that, because the example that I used earlier with the house. You're not just going to let nobody into your home. You're going to be real wary of who they are. You're going to be looking through the peephole, looking through your security system, seeing who that is. It's the same thing with a woman's vessel. She has to be the same way. Because when you lay down with a man who is not even, especially if they're not even conscious, if they still on phase one, because phase one is religion. If they're not even conscious and you laying down with them, then and your child comes out to be a savage, because that's what they're pushing on the radio, savagery. That's what they're pushing on the radio, is straight savagery. So why is it so important to have your father touch the baby's head when it comes out the womb? The reason why is because when a baby gets touched, the first person that touches that baby's head, it plays a factor in that child's life into the future. It plays a real big factor. The father needs to be the first one to touch that baby's head. It's not the doctor. Who's all these doctors? Look at who the doctors are. You got some so-called black people that are doctors, but what's in their mind? Everything's mental. What's in that doctor's mind? You don't know if that doctor is a Christian. You don't know if that doctor is a Muslim. So when that doctor touches your baby head, it sends an electrical surge. It sends a shock surge to that baby's head, a shock wave of electrical information, because that's the first one. That's the first one your child encounters. So it's so important that your father is the first one to touch your baby's head. Now, if some of the fathers out here, now what happens is, because we back on the planet, so in the year 2020, they already knew we was coming back in the year 2020, because when I said this in my past video, when I was in grade school, I was probably in the third grade, and this so-called white girl was sitting next to me, and out the blue, she said this out the blue. She just said, "You know what my daddy said?" And I said, "Well, what's that?" My daddy said the world's going to end in 2020. She told me, we was in the third grade when she told me that. And it didn't sink to me until I was activated. Even when I was conscious, I didn't even remember that. So it's so important. And when it says, when they're saying the world ends, it's the philosophies and the doctrines. That stuff's coming to an end. That stuff's coming to an end. Going back, I don't want to say going back, but extending the mind frame. The mind has to be extended. So when they touch your baby's head, you have these East Indians. There's a lot of East Indian doctors out here. Um, Caucasians, Asians. You don't know what type of witchcraft they're putting on your baby when they come out the room, especially if it's a so-called black baby, because they already knew that we was going to be back on the planet to activate the minds, because everything's mental. Now, if you're a father and you want to be the one that touches your child first when the child comes on the planet or back on the planet, excuse me, you want to be the first one. So all you got to do is do research. Like I said in my past video, there's only a couple of things you need to be researching, because it's always been about intel. It's never been about information. That's where the power's at. When you do research, it need to be on biochemistry, biochemistry about the body, building, architecture, and there's another one I forgot. But that's what you do research on. You don't do research and try to figure out, who was the last people on the planet that did this and did that. That doesn't even matter no more when it comes to your child, because your child's going to be the future one. The future one. So that's when you go do research. You do research when you're dealing with a body, you're dealing with architecture, you're dealing with biochemistry, or you dealing with space travel, stuff on that aspect. That's when you do research on. You do research on that. You don't do research on certain people, because it don't matter. They already passed away, or they already came back here. Not passed away. They already been reincarnated here, or they went somewhere else, because the whole universe is connected. So when you do research, you go do research. Once your woman is conceived and she's pregnant, you go do research on how to put your own woman through labor. And when you go up into that doctor room and you see that doctor, and that doctor, is mankind, you need to be like, "Excuse me, doc, I got this." "What do you mean? You got that?" Well, and the first thing he's going to say is, "Well, if anything happens to the baby, we're not responsible for it, because you're the one." Because that's how important they want to be to that wound. They want to be close to that portal, because the so-called black woman, her wound is an organic portal. That's what her wound is. It's an organic portal, going in and coming out. That's what the so-called black woman is. She is a organic portal, porting the intel. That's what portal means. Porting intel. Because if you're not porting intel and you have a baby, and that baby's just lost in the world, listen to all the BS that's in the world, this and that, that baby lost. And I just seen on the news, some like a 12-year-old or something like that, I'm not very sure, that got shot down by the police, this and that. Where was your parents? Where was their parents at? What did their parents teach them? What type of music was their parents listening to? And then when the police gun them down, y'all want to be all emotional. Be all emotional. And I'm not even going to go to the hypnosis, because I already broke that down in my last video about the hypnosis. How some of these police officers allegedly are under hypnosis, under a spell. That's why it's so important for you. It's so important for the father to be the one to touch your baby's head. What's the head? The head is the first thing that comes out the womb, because the mind is always going to be first. The mind's always going to be first. So you got this East Indian or Asian or Caucasian guy or female touching your baby first about the womb, and then what do? They hand it to the mother. And then they want the father to cut the umbilical cord. The reason why, they don't care who cuts the umbilical cord, because they already touched your baby first. That's why they don't care if you cut the umbilical cord. They're quick to give you the scissors, because they already put the spell in the witchcraft on your baby's mind. That's why it's so important for the father to be the first one to touch that baby when he comes out that organic portal. Porting the intel. The next. What is the next? The next is your child coming out the womb. That's the next. That's the next. Your child coming out that womb. That's why it's so important for the father to be the first one to touch, because the creators, and I said it with an S, the creators, when they created this solar system, because the solar system just didn't happen. When they created the solar system, they made, and then when they made the womb, and the inside of the womb, they made it so the head comes out first. Why is that? The head comes out first because the mind is always going to be first. The mind is what's going to move forward. The electricity, the electrical surge. That's why I said the Bible's nothing but codes. People take the Bible so serious. The Bible's not to be took literally. The Bible is broke down in codes, and they knew we was going to be back on the planet to break the Bible down for y'all. Because y'all so stuck in listening to these so-called prophets. Who coming with something next? Who is quote unquote the real prophets? Y'all ain't coming with nothing next. You're not a prophet. I don't even like use the word prophet, because that's a religion word. But the prophets only want to profit. The prophets, they want the money, because they're not coming with nothing next. So why is it called profit? Because they want to profit off of you. They want that money. That's why it's so important for you to be the first one, especially if you're a man, to touch your baby's mind, the head, the crown. I'm not even talking about kings and queens, because another thing about the kings and queens, I was going to do a video on that, but kings and queens never came from us. That came from mankind. They flip everything onto y'all. The Olmecs, the Aztecs, the Egyptians, they ain't never called themselves kings and queens. But see, that's how the beast is sneaky like that. They flip everything on y'all. So people be like, oh, kings and queens, this and that. I'll be like, oh, okay. But the mind activation, the electrical surge, that's why it's so important for your father to be the first one to touch that head when it comes out the womb. The organic portal is the activated one. New Brighton, good night.